Hey guys, really excited about this video today. I'm here with Jan Rothney over in England in the UK. Jan lived with ME/CFS in varying degrees of severity, at times housebound and often or at times also bedbound. And she made some incredible progress during her journey, but also during that time had to learn how to navigate some pretty crushing relapses. But Jan now sits here today with us fully recovered, which is absolutely incredible. And she's gone on to support others with their recovery journey as well. Jan created her own program in 2013 called Reset to Thrive and is also the author of the incredible book Breaking Free, a guide to recovering from chronic fatigue syndrome and long COVID symptoms. In this video, we are going to hear Jan's incredible recovery story, and also she's going to share her top tips and strategies that she has found not only to help people recover, but to remain healthy long term. So thank you, Jan, so much for being here today. So excited to get into this.
Thank you.
And just before we dive in, I want to send out our member shout out today. It's to Kathy Stoner. Kathy, you are one of the OGs. Kathy has been with me since the very beginning of this channel when my videos were very poorly made, and she had a lot of patience for my bad lighting and bad sound. So thank you, Kathy, for the support. If you're watching and you want to become a member, you can click join under this video, and you can find out how to become a channel member or learn more about how you can support the channel and help continue to get more content like this out there, and also get instant access to exclusive perks and content. So, Jan, how did this all start for you?
How did my ME start?
Yes.
Well, it literally seemed to start with an absolute crash. I was running around an adventure centre with my daughter and her friend, doing the usual full-time mum, crazy, running around the centre, came home, doing the house, etc., went out with friends, got a runny nose, which was always the start of a cold that knocked me for six. That had done for 10 years, and I didn't really think very much about it. I miraculously didn't end up in bed with that runny nose that night, and I phoned my mum to actually say, I can't believe it, for the first time in 10 years I started a cold and I'm okay. And then I carried on that day and I went to bed and I literally didn't wake up. I mean, I didn't wake up for weeks. I had to be lifted up to be given water, but I was so completely out of it that they had to try and force me to drink. I didn't eat. I literally was asleep for 3 to 4 weeks. And then after that, I was mostly bedridden for about 4 months, completely bedridden. And then I gradually was able to crawl out of bed, and yeah, it was a big shock. But as many people possibly realise, although it seemed to come out of the blue, of course it didn't. It had been building up for many years. Yeah, so it was a pretty frightening time, because one minute you're running around super active, hyper, and the next minute your body has literally shut down. So
I think this is probably one of the most rapid, severe onsets of this that I've ever heard about. That is
I know,
intense.
it was really traumatic, obviously.
Yeah.
I mean, in hindsight, and I say this in the book, I don't know if you've ever heard of general adaptive syndrome, but I was very fortunate. I taught psychology in health and social care. And I taught everything that I used to recover. And general adaptive syndrome is essentially that the body's going into a stress response. It's surviving, not thriving. And if that carries on for a long time, so you have overload, stressors, etc., then you go into this resistance period where the body tries to keep going, but is really struggling. So I had when I saw my GP and we looked back over my medical notes, I had 10 years of post-viral fatigue with having colds, just literally a cold would put me in bed for days. And then I'd get back to work, and then I'd get another cold a few weeks later, and I literally, as soon as I started a runny nose, I was bedridden. I couldn't move. And that had actually gone on for 10 years. But I think nobody joined up the dots because, I'd had IBS, I had skin rashes, I developed allergies. So there were lots and lots and lots of symptoms. But the actual crash was so dramatic. It was, really, literally, running around the Adventure Centre on the Saturday and completely gone out of it in a dark room thereafter.
When that happened, what did you, your family, your doctors, what did they think was happening?
Well, my children, it was really hard for my children because they were only 12 and 14 and I was a single mom at that point. I'd just gone through a separation and I think for them it was quite scary and they just didn't know what was happening. My doctor, when I did see my doctor, he was absolutely brilliant and I put it in the book and I actually acknowledge him in the book because he always said, you will recover. You have been through a really tough time and you will recover. Obviously my family were just didn't know what had happened to me. I don't think anybody really realised how bad it was because I didn't live near my family. So I don't think they actually realised I was 24 hours a day in bed. They would just speak to my children at the weekend and they'd say, oh yeah, Mum's still in bed. But I'm not sure they realised until a bit later on just what state I was in. But it hadn't been for my doctor, in the bad times. And I say this in the book, I was so fortunate to have a doctor that kept telling me, you will recover, you will get over this. Because I know so many people that have been told by their doctors, you're never going to get over this. And that is the worst thing you can tell anybody. It was pretty horrendous. Yeah.
So this doctor that told you you would recover, his faith in that came from where? Did he have a recovery protocol or he'd seen it before? How did he want you to move forward? And I'm just curious. It's so amazing that you had that because like you said, virtually no one does. But
I know.
So where was that belief in him coming from?
I think because I had known this doctor for 15, 20 years. So he knew what a strong person I was. And he knew what I'd been going through for a very long time. Because I had spoken to him about various things previously. And he just kept saying to me, you've had a really tough time. The body is just telling you to stop and you need to rest. And he just kept saying to me, and he was so lovely. He used to phone me at home because I couldn't get to the surgery. And he used to just phone and reassure me and say, just rest, your body needs to rest. And I knew my body needed to rest. I knew that I'd been living on a wing and a prayer for all sorts of reasons. I do remember the first time I woke up, my first memory of waking up, and I was in a dark room. And I can just remember thinking it's finally happened because I knew that my life wasn't sustainable. And because of my background in health and social care and psychology, I knew it was my protective system shutting me down. And I think because I knew that, it took the fear away because I understood what had happened to me. And I think if I hadn't had a background in health and social care, if I hadn't taught all of these things, because I used to teach psychoneuroimmunology. That was one of the courses that I taught. So I knew about the connection between the effect between the neural system and how it affects the immune system and the gut. So I'd always had that understanding, and I think because of that, I took it for granted myself. I'd never known anybody with ME. I'd never heard of it. There was no YouTube, there was no social media. So I just assumed that my body had packed in because it had been overloaded and pushed to the limit. And it would recover when I let it rest. But of course it took more than rest. But I did know that that's what I had to do. And so I was okay. I wasn't okay. It was devastating. But I had to learn to be okay about just lying in bed and believing that I need this and I will get better. So that was really, really helpful, having that. It's really hard to talk about, actually.
Yeah. Sounds like a really hard time.
Yeah, it was. But I think I was just so fortunate that I did assume that I would recover. It hadn't really entered my head that I wouldn't recover because I'd never heard of this thing. I did have a lady come from the ME Association because she was actually the wife of a colleague that I worked with. And she was the first person that said that she had ME. And she told me, you will never recover and you will get used to this. And I thought, I don't need this person in my life. And I asked her not to come back again. It's really not useful having people give you messages that are going to get you stuck. I was very fortunate that I think my family just assumed that I would get better. I had a neighbour that used to phone me, and he was really sweet. He used to do the shopping for the children and things. And he used to just say, oh, you're back in bed again. You know, when I was recovering, obviously when I was, you know, in and out of bed at that stage. And he made me be unafraid of setbacks and unafraid of being back in bed again after I'd managed to do something, because he just kept saying, you know, oh, you're like Sleeping Beauty. You just need lots and lots of rest and then you're going to get better. And having people around you that are really positive and believe that you're going to be okay is so important, really important.
So you said it took more than rest to get you through this. So what sorts of things did you start to try?
So I knew that I had to be really completely at ease with where I was at, no matter what I was doing, whether I was asleep or whether I was bedridden or whether I, you know, managed to get downstairs but then crashed at the bottom of the stairs. You know, I'm sure you've heard of people falling asleep because you can't get back up again. And I just knew I've just got to be okay with all of it. I knew that I had to latch on to every tiny bit of evidence that my body's better than it was. So where I'd been 100% crashed and asleep and bedridden, my first memory was crawling out of bed and getting across my room to the hall, to the toilet, and actually celebrating. I can remember holding onto the wall and just thinking, this is a good thing. You're not completely bedridden, your body's started to work, and just seeing every tiny thing as progress and a celebration. And even if I was back in bed again, I lay in bed reciting all the things I have done. So even though I'm back in bed now and my body needs to rest, I did get down the stairs, I did make a cup of tea, I did do this, I did do that, and I just constantly focused on the fact that my body is starting to work again. Maybe not all the time, but it is starting to work again. And celebrating your successes is such a huge thing. Just really focus. You know, there's actually, I've only just recently read about it, but there's a big thing in neurological chronic conditions now that they recognise that the attention processing system in your brain, you know, what your brain's paying attention to, is a really, really important part of the body getting stuck in chronic conditions or not, you know, moving on from them, whether it's pain or fatigue or IBS or anything. And I was just very fortunate because I taught this stuff that I knew that I had to pay attention to minimal gains, to any tiny, you know. I met people years later and, you know, they had dismissed everything and been absolutely terrified about crawling out of bed. And I know that is a big difference, that actually if you perceive it as something amazing, incredible, you know, you've got to really hold on to it and latch onto it and keep that in the forefront of your mind. The other thing was changing my perception. So this is all in the book, but because the whole book is about how I did it. Changing your perception of the symptoms. So I would lie in bed when I couldn't move out of bed, and I would get these incredible sensations of almost being seasick, like just the whole body. I don't know if other people have this, I'm sure they do, where the whole body just felt like it was, I suppose, a bit like vertigo. but I was lying flat. And actually, I learned just to do mindfulness. I did a lot of meditation. That was a really important part of my recovery. I did meditation every day on getting grounded, on, doing the oak tree, etc., etc. And I did that when I was bedridden, of stepping into what it is to do my meditation, to do mindfulness. And so I started to notice the symptoms, whatever they were, whether it was the fatigue or the pain or this incredible sickness, seasickness feeling. I just saw them as these incredible experiences, sensations. And when I started to see them mindfully, which in psychology, I didn't know mindfulness in those days. We used to call it awareness in psychology, just becoming aware of things, becoming conscious. And when I distanced myself from the symptoms and just literally watched them doing what they're doing, then it took the fear away, and I noticed them just as sensations, and I'm just going to let all these chemicals do whatever they're doing, and I'm just going to lie here until it passes. But another big thing, which I do put in my book, is I had to have faith. Sometimes when I was bedridden, because it is terrifying, it was too much for me. It was too big to deal with. And so I can remember just saying, right, I'm just going to give all of this stuff and put it out to the universe and let the universe deal with it while I just rest. And it was literally putting it away so that I could rest at ease and not have the burden of dealing with all of this stuff. And that was a huge part of moving on, because the whole thing about chronic conditions is the brain is getting the message that you're in trouble, that there's a problem, there's a threat, there's a danger, that you need to be in survival mode. And we have to stop that. That's the key thing. We have to stop the feedback loop, going back to that malfunctioning protective brain that is sending out these signals, which are signals for survival. Pain, fatigue is a survival mechanism to shut us down when there's danger. Fight and flight is the hyperarousal to get us into what it wants, to put us into fight and flight to get us away from a problem. And I was just so fortunate that I knew that stuff, because I taught stress management. I taught about health to do with stress. And I would say the key thing is really breaking that cycle. So everything you do, whether it's seeing symptoms as funny little sensations, whether it's focusing on the good stuff, not focusing on the bad stuff, all of it, the bottom line is, it's all about breaking that cycle. It's putting a stop on saying, I'm scared, or I can't do this is too much for me. It's all about saying, actually, I'm okay. I am safe. I don't need you. I don't need protecting. I did need protecting when I crashed. I really believe I did. I think if I hadn't crashed, I probably would have ended up with a heart attack or a stroke or something, But I didn't need protecting after months of rest. And I would say to anybody, the key thing is to know whatever is happening, you are safe. You don't need protecting. You can do this. And of course, on top of that was, having a serenity, doing the mindfulness, doing the meditation. I did lots and lots of poetry to get down how I was feeling, because, you can't be over emotional. I allowed myself 20 minutes to cry, get upset, and then I'd do, okay, that's enough. Come on, you've done your little bit. What do you need to do now? And then I'd go and, when I was better, I would always meditate in my garden, even if it was raining. I would do some poetry. I would mostly write, mostly do poetry. But whatever is something that feels good, And then I started, however much I could walk around my house, I started opening the door and going out of my house and doing that much out of my house. But a key thing, which is also in the book, is I knew that I had to confront things that were difficult. So it's in my book and it's on the program. I had a day when I was really recovering and I was out, I was going out and I might have had a couple of days that were good. And I had been out the day before and I'd come back in the door and I said to my daughter, oh, I just walked round the block, I was so excited. And my daughter's like, oh, well done, Mum. You have to turn everything into a big deal. Really turn every achievement into a big deal. That's so important. And then this day I went to open my front door to go for a walk. And I think what I had was actually a panic attack. So I had this panic attack just out of the blue, not thinking at all about being scared of going out the door. And the minute I opened the door, my body just went into this full-blown terror. And then the reptile, as I call it in the book, just shut me down and my legs went and I was on the floor. And that was the moment. That was such a pivotal moment because I know at that moment most people would shut the door and be housebound because it's absolutely terrifying. And just because I taught psychology, I taught about conditioned responses, I taught Pavlov's dogs, I taught about, panic attacks and how the brain is trying to protect you. And so I lay on my floor and I just said, do you know, brain, I don't need protecting. I don't need protecting. And this is where focus is so important because I just lay there. Well, at that point I was sitting up and I just said, do you know what? You, protective brain, are obsessed with all the times that I've had a bad experience going outside. It's a bit like post-traumatic stress disorder or anything like that. The brain is meant to tell you not to do it again. If you'd fallen off a horse or had a car crash, it doesn't want you to get back in the car. And I knew that's what was happening. And so I had to retrain the brain to focus on the right stuff. And it had every reason to want to stop me going out because I'd collapsed so many times outside and I'd been taken off in the ambulance, I think 5 times whilst I was trying to recover. Because I collapsed in a road once, I collapsed in shops, etc. So I knew this protective brain was trying to shut me down and put me into high arousal and trying to shut me down, the 2 methods of survival. And it was trying to protect me from having another bad experience. So I just lay there and then I sat and said, okay, this is the sign for focus. And I just said, I don't need you. You are obsessed with all the times I've had a bad experience. And I just recited all the times of my life. I have spent years going outside. I've been to school every day. I've walked on the roads. I've walked on the hills. I've been on buses. I've been on trains. I've done this. I've done that. And I just spent maybe 10, 15 minutes just talking, which sounds quite odd, but it's very useful. Talking to this protective brain that was sending these wrong messages and saying, this is what I'm focused on. I'm going to be a bit more sensible, but you are not going to stop me going out this door. And then when I got my focus back and I did some breathing and calmed the whole system down, then I had to prove to the protective brain that I don't need to avoid anything. Because, so much that's taught about chronic fatigue is to avoid. So this is on the video, and it does sound ridiculous, but it's very effective. I opened the front door, and I took 1 step outside the front door, and I just said, see, I don't need you. I can do this. And then I shut the front door, and I did my little celebratory, yes, because I've beaten the protective brain doing this constant feedback that is, you need protecting, we're going to fire off, this, which is a survival system, we're going to shut you down, or we're going to put you into high arousal. I said, no, you are not. So you must face the triggers. And then, after I'd celebrated, then I did another little step. and another little step. And I just said, see, I don't need you. I do not need you. I am safe. And actually, that's what I did for every single thing. So where steps were hard, I just climbed one step of a staircase. And then I said, see, I can do it. I can do it. And I literally just climbed one step and then stopped and then played with doing 2 steps. And it's that playing. It was the playing. In the book, I call it the chimp and the reptile. But it's about, you're not going to get the better of me. I am going to put on my human brain, my clever brain, and I am going to override this. So I think that was a huge part of recovery, because actually I've only just read Alan Gordon's book, The Way Out. I read it on holiday. I was on holiday last week. And it was actually saying in there about the conditioned response, that the brain learns, the Pavlovian response. It learns that this is what we do in this situation. Whether it's, you've gone a walk for 5 minutes, that's enough. This is what we do, when you see people. This is what we do when you open your front door. And the conditioned response is such a big part of chronic fatigue, that the brain has learnt the bad stuff and it's then going to protect you. So actually, it's really important to face every event that used to be completely normal, that is now become a what if, and actually just do a tiny thing like open the front door and shut it again, but celebrate it, really celebrate having faced that little thing and overcome it. And that's how I did so much of my recovery, and had huge setbacks. But then again, setbacks are okay, because you have to see them as actually, of course I'm going to have setbacks. I'm not expecting to be fully recovered yet, but I've done so many things. And it is that focusing on what I have done when I have setbacks. So it's a whole chapter in the book about how to deal with setbacks. So I think for me, it was lots of Agle exercises, meditation, mindfulness. I did stretches every morning. I did a little yoga stretch. Every morning if I could. I did the yoga, which was the sunrise and the cobra. There was a little 5 sequences that I'd found in a book, which is really, really useful. But it all comes down to being fearless, stopping the protective system.
It very much resonates with what a lot of people that I interview are saying. It's everyone's got a slightly different way of explaining it, but it sounds a lot like what most people I talk to are sharing when they talk about their recovery. But you've explained this and broken it down really well in a way that I think helps make it easier for people to understand and visualize what this looks like day to day when you're slowly doing this sort of rewiring process. So yeah, I appreciate you taking the time to break all of that down. And for those of you watching, as always, in the video description, you can find Jan's book, information about her recovery program, how to get in touch, everything you need to learn more about Jan and from Jan. So I just really want to thank you for your time today. I really appreciate you sharing your story. I know a lot of people will benefit from it. I've learned from it. And I just am really grateful for your time today. Thank you, Jan.
Thank you. And if anybody wants to join me as a coach, because there's going to be a limit to how long I can go on forever. If anybody's interested in coaching other people, because my program was supposed to be just videos to support the book, and it's ended up being live webinars, group support, and one-to-one support. So I'm really looking for somebody to come and join me to do some coaching if they're qualified coaches and they know about chronic fatigue, etc., and to eventually come and take over.
There you go. We're creating job opportunities here on the channel. That's the first. So yeah, and lots of people out there who recover are, passionate about helping other people and want to put their information, their experiences to use. So I imagine you might have some people reaching out. So yeah. Thank you also to those of you watching. Always appreciate all of your comments and feedback and your support, and sending hug and loves to you. Love. loves, lots of love to you as always. I know it can be really, really challenging navigating these sorts of health conditions, but don't give up.
Yeah.
I believe your answers are out there. So thank you again, Jen. Thank you to those of you watching. I hope you
Oh,
enjoyed this video. I hope you got something out of it, and I hope to see
thank
you
you.
in one of the next ones.